Good morning. Welcome to the April 16th show of the Cory Morgan Show on the Western Standard. Always lots to rant about, lots to talk about. Busy news weeks these days, so keeps us occupied in the alternative media world anyways. Or as our health minister was saying in the legislature, apparently the Western Standard is an alt-right conspiracy type site. Well, if we're getting under the skin of the people in power, and perhaps we're saying the right things. So today's show is going to be a good one. I've got Darcy Gerow coming on in about 15 minutes. He's been a columnist for the Western Standard. He's a liberty-minded sort of guy. I've done podcasts with him before. We want to drill down and talk and dig into a bit of the issues coming up with this whole COVID thing, that changes it's done societally, policy-wise, mindset-wise. Because I'm really concerned about the long-term effects and how easily people succumb to just letting the state take over managing their lives, their businesses, everything. For people who are, concerned with individual liberties, this is a very distressing time to be alive and watching this occurring and happening. So that'll be a great talk. After that, I've got Fergus Hodgson coming on. He's from Econ Americas, and we're going to talk, something we haven't been hearing enough about too is the consequences of the pandemic policies on our economy, on our currency, things like inflation and that. We're hearing rumblings of it, but we haven't really seen it that much yet. Houses are going strangely wild, but we haven't seen the mass inflation despite the massive amount of borrowing going on. I imagine it's still going to be coming, but it's not here yet. So, we can drill down a bit and talk and try and figure out why that's the case. Why has this not taken off, which is a good thing, I guess. We don't need to be in a hurry for that disaster. So I'll get some of the other stuff going here. Our sponsor, again, is Penny at chironsway.com. She offers locally based out of Calgary services if you get stress, anxiety, and who doesn't these days. She can give some natural remedies, counseling, dietary changes that might help you out with what you need. She's supporting us. Consider supporting her, check it out. Consultations are free. She might have just what you need to help get you through some things. Something else that's kind of been a co-sponsoring going on, in a sense, I guess you could say, is there's a rodeo coming up. I did a video on this with Ty Northcott a little while ago. He's got a rodeo coming at the end of this month, Rodeo Rally. They do have tickets on sale now at Eventbrite. You can go there and pre-purchase. It's going to run for 2 days on the Saturday and Sunday at the end of the month. $15 to get in. Get out, have a good time. This is a way you can push back against the restrictions. This is the way we can say we've had enough. Not everybody necessarily wants to go march on City Hall in downtown Calgary or go to the legislature, but this is a way you can actually have fun, have a good day out with the family, support a business that is hurting, another of so many businesses right now, and that is the rodeo industry. These things that we don't talk about, we don't think about, but they're hurting. I mean, he's got livestock. You can't just keep feeding these things forever. You've either got to sell them, slaughter them, or go bankrupt, and he's facing all of those. So Ty Northcott, and you can find it at Northcott Rodeos on Facebook for more details as well, is holding a rodeo out by Bowden at the end of the month. Close drive to Calgary. Camping's free. So there's no beer gardens on site. They're avoiding the AGLC hassles, and I can understand that. I don't blame them a bit for that. And they got some guest speakers, Rick Kohut, Glenn Carrott, and Nadine Wellwood so far. It'll be a really fun weekend, and it's a good way to tell the government, we're done. We're done. We're getting on with our lives, and there's not much you can do about it. Let's see them try and stop it. This isn't a little church you can fence in. This isn't a small gathering where the state can come in and round everybody up and push them aside. This is a large property up by Bowden, and Ty is taking a stand, and we really appreciate that. The Western Standard is sponsoring this event, and we want to promote this as much as possible. Make time at the end of the month. Share this. Get it out there. Let's make sure we get thousands of Albertans showing up there. And then we could say, Jason Kenney, what are you going to do about it? It'll be interesting to see what he will do about it, if he can do anything about it. All right, now let's get on to other conservative assholes. I got to use the term. I was just I know I tend to be negative thinking and don't hold much optimism with a lot of things and very critical, but still, I hoped for a little better out of O'Toole. I mean, we've been rough on him, but maybe he would show a glimmer of some principle. But no, yesterday he threw it all out the window. He really did. He came out with a carbon tax. You know, he just won the leadership less than a year ago. Somebody asking the rodeo dates. Sorry, I just do want to cover that quickly, in case you didn't see that with the pull-up. That is on Saturday, May 1st at 1 p.m. and Sunday, May 2nd. And it's sanctioned by the World of Rodeo Canada. Now, back to our conservative, not-so-conservative leader and his carbon tax. I've taken, for those who can't see it, I will describe it, a screen snap of a tweet from Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's going to be on with me at the end of next week, by the way, to talk about the federal budget. And he's quoting, and here's a picture of Aaron O'Toole standing in front of the no carbon tax pledge, smiling, with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Here's the quote: "I, Aaron O'Toole, promise that if elected Prime Minister of Canada, I will immediately repeal the Trudeau carbon tax and reject any future national carbon tax or cap and trade scheme." This was from June 2020. Yesterday, he gave us a carbon tax. He lied. There's no other way to put it. The man lied to us. He lied to win the leadership, and then he just completely flip-flopped and gave us a carbon tax. And there's some guys talking about, no, it's not a carbon tax. It's a different thing. It's fees. The term for that is trying to polish a turd. All right. There's no other ways about it. You're taking money off of us for anything we purchase that's petrochemical related or may have carbon emissions. And then you are going to rebate it supposedly to us in a way that's going to make the world a greener, happier place with fluffy bunnies hopping around and other such garbage. He even went to the convention as well, and that would be the time. Like if you really felt that a carbon tax is the way to go, because there's some fart catchers for the Conservative Party of Canada getting on my case on Twitter. Well, that's the only way he's going to win. Really? Well, then why didn't he run on the bloody leadership with that? Why didn't he go to the Conservative Convention with that? Those are the times then to say, look, the only way to win is to bring in a carbon tax. We will never win any other way. So vote for me and I'll bring in the carbon tax. See, that's the way you do it. Instead, he lied to our faces. He lied to win the leadership. He said there was absolutely no way he was going to do a carbon tax. And then he lied to the membership of the convention, because that would be your next step, your next chance. You were in front of the members. You were in front of the donors. You're in front of the supporters. You could, I don't know. I mean, you guys are politicians. You can spin things. You can say the circumstances have changed. We've done heavy intensive polling. We just feel a carbon tax is the one and only way that we can do this. Please, membership of the Conservative Party, endorse me as I go ahead with this. But no, he didn't. I mean, he put forward this fluffy notion about accepting climate change, which the members told him to roll up and stuff up his butt. And now he's come forth with a bloody carbon tax. And he's lost what little credibility he had. You guys telling me he's going to win with this? Really? How do you win by showing yourself to be a liar? How can voters believe anything out of him? I mean, I'm sure that Gerald Butts and Justin Trudeau are just giggling right now, because all they'll have to say is, how do you believe if he's even going to do the carbon tax? I mean, he said he wasn't going to do it before. He could always change his mind. He could be lying now. I mean, he's lying at one point. He can lie again. Lost principle is far more damaging than a bad policy. And his principles have shown to be virtually none. It's no good. He's not going to win the election through this. So get ready for another term of Trudeau. Hey, I don't have the magic answer on how to unseat Trudeau. I'll tell you one thing I've done. I've been mistaken about. I've underestimated that guy. He is not that easy to knock off as a leader. Oh, no, people don't freak out. I'm not talking about assassination. And electorally remove as a leader. That party is entrenched. They've got smart advisors. They're strategically bright, and they need somebody bright to come against them. And the Gerber baby there, flip-flopping around, lying to his base about a carbon tax, taking on the usual thing that we hear enough of out here too, which is screw the West, we'll take the rest. Because, of course, the carbon tax, any carbon tax, disproportionately beats the snot out of the West, which is why it's a popular policy in the East. Welcome to Canada. Canada is broken. Our system is broken. It forces parties to cater to the center. This is nothing new. But again, it doesn't stop me from being pissed off when we get taken, for a ride like this with somebody. I mean, when did he know he was lying? Was it right at the time when he signed that pledge saying there wasn't going to be another carbon tax, or did he really actually change his mind a little bit later? I don't know, but it's unacceptable. And now what? Yes, and as others are pointing out, Wexit. Something I said recently too. When liberals screw around with the West, we get ticked off. That's nothing new. This has been happening since, again, the beginning of Confederation, but we expect it of them. We anticipate the liberals are going to hoop us in favor of policies that'll favor Quebec and Ontario. That's nothing new at all. It's when conservatives screw us that we get really mad. That's when separatists are created. That's when you get people throw up their hands and say, that's it, I'm out. And you know what? They're right, because it's the system that's broken. It's not the party. The best you can do is get a party in for a little while that might be a little less bad to the West for a bit. But that party will be kicked out pretty quickly, and the Liberals will come in where they can just be overtly bad to the West. There's no winning. It's a cycle. But, so again, I'd rather than O'Toole won on principle if he was going to try and get into office, rather than lying to us on saying he wasn't going to bring in a carbon tax and then turning around and doing it. So, I don't know. Focus your efforts on the West, guys. There's nothing to win out there. I know Wexit and was it Maverick Party and PPC are just shells of party. But you know what? Hey, if they're not lying to me, I'm more inclined to vote for them. That's a big thing for me. I'm big on just don't lie to my face. I know politicians do it all the time, but at least try to be a little better with it. This was just flagrant. So I'm done. I mean, I don't have a political membership. I haven't had one for quite some time. I feel it hinders my ability to speak openly on these issues. But I was still, as I said, I can still let myself manage to get floored now and then with some of the stuff that comes out of our political leadership. As the Western Standard reported too, and Derek Fildebrand called some members of Parliament in the West that we knew. And apparently they weren't warned about this carbon tax flip-flop either. So, these guys, I can't imagine what the phone lines are. I really do feel for those people who work in the offices for members of Parliament in the West right now, because I imagine the phones are just burning right now. And O'Toole has just gone off on his own, hasn't consulted his Western caucus, hasn't talked to anybody, gone completely against the pledge he made not to have a carbon tax. And these MPs out West are holding the bag. What I want to see? I want to see them out. I really do. Let's go reform again. That was the best bloody government we ever had. Jean Chrétien with reform breathing down their neck. There's no sense trying to play by Central Canada's rules. We're only going to lose, guys. We're losing over and over again. To hell with O'Toole. You used us. You turned your back immediately. I wouldn't vote for you if you're the only candidate on the ballot. You don't deserve my support, nor anybody else in the West support. So there's an election coming soon. There's almost no doubt about that. And you've put yourself in a real poor way to try and stand up for it. So I'm just going to look through a few more things in the news here before I get to Darcy. Quebec, we're seeing the pushback. This is one thing I will give Quebec. They do stand up for themselves. That's something we've got to do more of anyways, is quit being apologetic. Let's just stand up for the West. Don't even bother trying to talk about the East anymore. Quebec doesn't talk about us. It's not that they dislike us. They don't care. They don't need to. And you know what? They've been right. We got to stop caring about them. Either way, they got to, I don't think riots were a good way to push back against the restrictions and lockdowns, but they're literally under a curfew. What do you expect to happen when you bottle people up like that? You don't even allow them out at night. So yeah, they're coming out in the streets and they're rioting. Out in Alberta, we're going to have a rodeo instead, but we're pushing back, and it's a good sign to see people pushing back for their liberties. I want to see marches. I want to see rational demonstrations. I want to see businesses standing up, keeping their doors open, like Chris Scott up in Mirror, Alberta, being in defiance of these restrictions. Churches keep going at it, but do keep it peaceful. We don't need to smash innocent businesses' windows out. We don't need to assault people. We don't need to spray paint things. We don't need to leave a mess behind ourselves. We can still express our rage without being destructive about it. I mean, the old sayings, just because those guys are doing it, when you point to the left, doesn't mean we should. Two wrongs don't make a right. Let's get out of the lockdown. So let's push back. Let's hold our leadership accountable. but let's do it rationally. So, speaking of reason and rationality, I've got Darcy Gerow on, and Darcy has, as I said, he's been a columnist with the Western Standard. I've had him on in a past podcast. I'll try and find the best frame so we can see his pretty face there. There we go. How you doing today, Darcy?
Doing well, Cory. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks. I just had to get my, head of steam going there, and O'Toole was kind enough to provide me a great deal of inspiration to get good and wound up. The vein on my side of my head's pulsing again.
Yeah, he can do that.
So, getting more to the bigger picture beyond the Toole there in Ottawa, liberty, libertarianism, that whole concept of, sorry, I just got to remove it from here. There we go. It's something that's really been a threat. I mean, it's been a difficult thing to push. It's been a tough area to make inroads with in the general public. I mean, we look for smaller victories and areas where we can, stand up for liberties and get policies that will help entrench our rights. But right now, I mean, we are in full retreat as far as I can see. I mean, the state has moved in under the justification of the pandemic, and they have set aside our individual rights. And what scares me is it doesn't seem to really bother a lot of people. What are your feelings on that with the general public and how they're accepting this new incursion upon individual rights?
Yeah, well, that's exactly the problem. I mean, it can't all be blamed on the state all the time either, because obviously people are asking for this stuff. I mean, people want the state to act as their mother and father and guardian and to take care of them, and it's prevalent in every aspect of our political culture. I mean, when you in every election, when you're talking about O'Toole just now, even and his carbon tax, I mean, he's trying to do something that is publicly popular. He's trying to gain support for that, and at the end of the day, everything that they can do is an infringement of some kind on people, so unless they're talking about repealing taxes, which isn't a conversation that's happened in a long time. But yeah, definitely with COVID, I mean, there hasn't even, I mean, as far as I know, they've barely debated this, these actions in any of the legislatures or in Parliament. I mean, these are all just autocratic edicts that are coming down from above. And I mean, that's that itself is a step removed from the regular, democratic process that we have. So yeah, it is dangerous. And it is disappointing that more people aren't worried about it.
Well, that's it. And everything is precedence. It's a matter of precedence. And the one we're setting right now, I talked a bit to you about that the other day. I mean, we've got the Charter of Rights, the creation of Pierre Trudeau. I mean, it has some good, important, strong rights in it, speech, association, mobility, expression. I mean, these are critical individual rights, but they did throw that little clause in Section 1 to say if we have something where, for the sake of the public good, that we can suspend these charter rights, when it comes to an issue of general safety or things like that. I mean, that was written in, and I don't think it's a totally unreasonable clause, but it's there for something really extreme, really out of the pale. Again, a foreign nation has invaded us, or aliens have landed and they're starting to take us over, the ant people or whatever it might be. It should be an absolute fundamental last resort before you invoke that and step on any right. But it seems that the proof has gone the other way. It's more like, we can take it on a whim, and you guys have to fight to get that right back if you want to. I think it's a misuse of our charter.
Well, it is. And actually, I have it here. And what it actually says is that the rights and freedoms set out in the charter are subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. And even that clause, I mean, the idea there with the it's supposed to work in tandem with Section 33, I believe it is, the notwithstanding clause, which still requires an act in Parliament, as far as I understand it. I'm no constitutional expert, but not only has there not been an act in Parliament or in any of the legislators to invoke the notwithstanding clause. I don't, regarding COVID, I think there's only been 4 times in its history it's been done successfully. So, yeah, I mean, it's I think it's important for people to understand, why a constitution is important. These are our charter rights are part of the Constitution. The Constitution is there. It ensures, that the people who make decisions are representing public opinion. It limits their power, and even then, the Charter of Rights goes to limit it further, where despite public opinion, Canadians are still guaranteed protections of certain rights, which, I mean, they're stomping on this thing. They're tearing it to shreds right now. I mean, with, religious freedoms, freedom of assembly, all kinds of things that are, really the foundational documents of our country. As much as I'm not a big, I think there's a lot of flaws in our Constitution, but I think as a bare minimum, these things should be followed. But yeah, I don't even know. Sometimes I wonder if these legislators have even read this thing.
Well, yeah, and again, I think it's the legislators and it's the citizens that are really kind of backwards on this. I mean, when you look at things like free expression, free mobility, the ability to gather and organize, like these were all rights modeled to protect you from government, not from your neighbor down the road, not from not from a virus. There's a reason that the freedom of association is so important. I mean, when organized labor was getting going, or when the revolutions come, the first thing the state does is say you can't have more than 3 people on a street corner and things such as that. So they enshrined those rights. That's one of the ones we shoved out the window. Sorry, you can't have strangers to your house. You can't meet in person. You can't go out. Among many others. Like, again, people forget what the purpose of that document really was, I think, and they're just so docile in accepting these infringements upon it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the document itself really, like you say, it enshrines rights that already exist for us. We have freedom of expression. I mean, those are in my mind inalienable rights, things that can't be taken away from us. Same with assembly, peaceful assembly, and yeah, I mean that's the first, that is the first step on the road to tyranny. Well, not the first one. I think it's I mean, now at this point, I think we're many steps down, but it's scary, the precedent that it sets, and the lack or the amount of apathy people have towards these things happening right now. I mean, they don't have the, it's hard to explain the government, should be, they have to be held accountable some way. I mean, and yeah, it's disappointing.
Yeah, well, we've gotten, to be honest and blunt, in my view, spoiled. I mean, that's the bottom line. And there's a lot of selfish attitude, I think, that frustrates me. And we see that, and it's always been around. When it comes to firearm ownership and property rights, people say, well, I don't have a gun, so I don't care if you take that guy's gun away. Well, no, that's not the way you've got to look at this. As I've said before, I am not a religious man at all. I don't go to services. It doesn't matter to me if churches are going or not going personally. But I understand the vital importance of free religion. I understand that again, has been another area that states, if they're authoritarians, they want to crush. That's an area where people gather, where they organize, where they socialize, whether for spiritual intent or for anything else. And that's, again, why those rights were entrenched like that. And those optics showing Alberta, of all places, with, Art Pawlowski having to shout and chase AHS officials. And that's something that really gets me. This isn't, well, there's a lot of areas I don't recognize a lot of authority, but these weren't even police. The head of that person was a bureaucrat, an AHS bureaucrat, a pointy-headed, paper-shuffling, chip on the shoulder, hall monitor bureaucrat. You don't tell me what to friggin' do. And I do not, I'm not big on the way Art Pawlowski does things in general, but as Derek said before too, he did it just right with them. He didn't negotiate. He didn't talk. He just said, get out of my place, get out right now, come back with a warrant. But he didn't get a lot of sympathy from non-religious people because they say, well, it's just a church. And that's where the problem we have is. I mean, that didn't impact me, but I understand how important that is. But how do we get that through to people? You've got to stand up for your neighbors, because in the long run, it's better for yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's like dealing again with charter rights or something. I mean, it's written again right in there. The freedom of religion and the freedom of assembly are right in Section 2 of the fundamental freedoms, and they do go hand in hand. I mean, a place of worship. I consider myself a Christian. I'm not as active as a lot of people, but yeah, I mean, it's an important part. And even as being a part of a political document, I mean, when you define a separation between church and state, the state has to, and this is all in historical context, of course, but you have to, you protect that freedom of worship, right? And again, yeah, I think it is a very fundamental freedom for people. I mean, that's their faith. I mean, those are their beliefs. I mean, their whole belief structure is based around this stuff. And not only that, I mean, what churches do for communities, what they do for charity, and helping homeless people, and most they haven't been able to have AA meetings in a lot of these places because they can't gather in the churches, right? I mean, and where a lot of AA meetings take place. So things like that. There's huge contributions to the community that are being trampled on. And yeah, I think the churches, a lot of them are taking the brunt of it. It's incredibly unfair, incredibly unethical, immoral. So yeah, I don't know what the answers are. I mean, I don't know what it takes for people to stand up and turn this thing around, and for popular opinion to swing to a point where they realize that we're losing something very important, very special, right? That a lot we take it for granted, and maybe that's part of the problem. A lot of countries don't have rights like these enshrined into their constitution, right?
No, and we enshrined those, though, or did, because we saw the importance on why that needs to be taken care of, and we really seem to have forgotten it. As I said, we're a lucky generation. We didn't have to live through a world war. I mean, this is the biggest challenge of our generation going on with this pandemic, and it's not as visible and clear cut as something like a war, I guess, is, to make people understand the importance of these freedoms and these abilities. And other things for churches, they're social hubs, they're community centers, and yeah, the vast majority of church time I've spent in my life, aside from for other people's weddings or funerals, has been AA meetings. And when I worked in the States and I traveled, I needed a place to go because that's where I'm going to want to get out and get a drink. So almost always it's the church providing it. It's a local service. It's a safe space. It's non-judgmental. Again, I'm not going in there to worship. They're just providing that space because they know there's a healthy activity for the community that's going on in here, and they're going to provide it. These things are being suspended right now. Or speaking again, at my place in Pritis, I live. My neighbors are a church. It's a little church there. It's an awesome one, actually, a cute looking little thing. It's over 100 years old. I don't attend it, but they're great neighbors. And another thing that I see is the people who show up there every week. I mean, they're dressed up They're seeing their neighbors. They're seeing their friends. That is more than just the religious aspect. That's a social, and they're often seniors, highlight of their week. This is a big part of their lives, and it's gone right now. You can't do that in a Zoom meeting. It's not the same. It doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's, at least now, I guess there's some, these are me and you talked about this time last year, even some of the, damning effects of the lockdowns, problems with depression and whatnot, alcoholism, suicide, at least now some of the, legacy media stuff is, they're talking about it now, but it's taken a year. Where it was pretty obvious that a lot of this, those things would happen, right? Some of the, the deaths of despair and the, unintended consequences of these lockdowns. Now, all the numbers are out there now. It's easy to see, but yeah, it's really terrible. There isn't a lot of evidence that these lockdowns have been effective in combating the virus. You can look at these charts. You can look at a chart of what's gone on here in Alberta or even across Canada when lockdowns were initiated, when mask mandates were put in place, and you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at that chart where any of that stuff was implemented. You could turn the chart upside down and you might have a better chance of figuring it out.
Yeah, and again, that passive and trusting nature of our society, something I've loved shoving into the faces of our, government masters is their projections. They keep making those expert projections. It seems they finally stopped putting those graphical ones out because they've embarrassed themselves so badly, so many times on these things. They're terrible. They're not even close. A 2-year-old with a crayon has a better chance of predicting where the infections are going to go, how the deaths are going to go, things like that, than the government has. The only thing that's consistent is they overstate the risk dramatically. And we're talking sometimes 10 or 100-fold. And they're modeling policy based on this. How do we hold these fools accountable for creating policy based on garbage? And not just once, but repeatedly and continually.
I have no idea how to hold them responsible. At this point, I think the best case, once, if ever they do let up on this, there's days when I wonder if ever they will. But, once we get through this, it seems to me like they're not going to have any way to enforce any of these fines that they're issuing, or they threaten people with jail time and stuff. I imagine, again, there will be major constitutional challenges after the fact. Once a person can actually get a court date to talk about some of this stuff. And I don't know, as far as holding these politicians, and again, it's not, the politicians, they're weak by nature because they will always cave to, the loudest voices. And, these bureaucrats, you have Hinshaw, and Bonnie Henry. Bonnie Henry's basically running British Columbia at this point, basing it completely on, these models that aren't accurate. So how do you hold them accountable? I have no idea. I'm not aware of a mechanism other than, legislators to stand up to these bureaucrats, and voting them out is a tricky thing. People had high hopes for, Jason Kenney to be a staunch defender of Alberta and, Canadian rights and freedoms. And, he is a huge disappointment. I think it's 2 years now that since he won. And I don't know. I will be surprised if he keeps his job after this is through.
Yeah, it's not looking pretty for him. One area is, again, and we just don't seem too inclined towards it. Jake Eskison keeps putting links to it. And it's true that they've been trying to get marches going. They've been doing things for a while in downtown Calgary. Looks like there's another one Sunday at 1 at Central Memorial Park. So, Chris Sky is going to be speaking at that. Come on out. Unfortunately, Sunday, I think the weather's supposed to be a little rougher, but whatever. We're Albertans. You can put on a heavier coat and go check that out. I've been to other ones, though, and not necessarily those. I guess there's 2 of them now. There's a March for Freedom and March for or Walk for Freedom, and I'm not sure. And I think they've kind of split. But I mean, a lot of these gatherings I've gone to have been dominated by people who are, just to put it the most polite way, they're not going to draw the mainstream person to join them. They're off on tangents. They perhaps have some different theories and views that I don't want to get into debating whether they're accurate or not, but they often aren't even related to the pandemic. And but I mean, I think a state does fear it if they see their citizens really coming out en masse. They do note that. I mean, large scale peaceful protests can change the course of the state, but we just don't bloody well do that here.
Yeah, well, it is difficult when I've been to some of the protests, and same thing. I can't relate closely to some of the messaging in it, so I'd rather not be seen there sometimes. But I mean, you do need people to stand up. You need them to peacefully protest, go for a walk. Let them know you're serious. But I don't know how many people are serious. I really don't. I don't know how many. Everybody's just seems to be totally apathetic to what's going on. They don't really seem to mind the precedent that it's setting, the loss of freedoms or the deterioration of the charter. And it's. I really don't know what it'll take for Albertans, for Canadians to make that leap.
Yeah, well, I think to a degree, I said a lot of people just don't know how. It's not like you get raised into these protests or moved. It's just not in you. You hear about it or you see it on TV. More creative means of pushing, and that's part of why. Again, for those who joined a little later in here, I mentioned it earlier, but Ty Northcott is holding a rodeo at the end of the month on May 1st and 2nd, I believe it is. It's if you look up Northcott Rodeos on Facebook or at Eventbrite, you can buy tickets. But that's up by Bowden. That's only, an hour out of Calgary, close to Red Deer, nice central spot. And there's something different. There's something people can come out to. You're not marching on the streets. You're not rallying. You're not at the legislature. Come on out. Go to a rodeo, because AHS has already warned him. They're already in his face. So this is your way to give him a middle finger back without being perhaps at the other rallies that people are less comfortable with. Let's make it an event. Let's have some fun with it. Spread that, have a good time. It's certainly distinctly Western and Albertan. But to get further with things, there'll probably be charges laid. I got a feeling, this is my prediction, hopefully a lot of Albertans come out, have a great time for 2 days. The police will kind of stand around the outsides, but they're not going to interfere because it would just turn into a gong show. I mean, imagine the optics is, you think a church was bad, try to break up a rodeo, guys. This is not going to go well. But they'll end up charging Ty and some others after the fact. But then will they go to court? They seem to be scared to go to court when it comes down to it in the end, right? Like I think the judges may have a nuanced view on the charter rights if we could just get in front of them. But they did that. They dragged along the Pastor Coates there for a long time. And then finally, push came to shove. You couldn't drag it out any longer. Okay, we're going to let you out and give you a $1,500 fine. The same thing with AHS and the restaurant in Mirror with Whistle Stop Cafe. In the end, they tended to drop most of it because he was willing to march into that court. And that's where they're going to have to say, this is how we're justifying crushing these businesses. They are going to have to say to a judge, this is so dire. Where are we at now in the dread third wave, this horrible third wave, where we're having 3 or 4 people out of 4.4 million people dying a day. And usually, again, they are elderly or with pre-existing conditions. A judge might say, you know what? That's not enough. It's not enough to suspend charter rights.
Well, yeah, it seems to me like, even a judge might, what it comes down to is there's still a process to do it. I mean, if they wanted to suspend all these charter rights, they can still invoke the notwithstanding clause. As far as I know, that they haven't even debated that in any of these legislatures. The bulk of the debate we see is, you'll see the odd conservative, saying we need a plan for reopening, and that's the strongest message we're getting from any of them right now, is we need a plan for reopening. That's not enough. I mean, they could have gone through the steps. I don't think the evidence was ever there that they could have done this legally. So yeah, I don't know. It's scary. I get, it really is that that we just let this happen. So.
Yeah, well, I think hindsight's going to paint a really ugly picture on what the government did, and in a number of countries and at a number of levels when we finally have the chance to look back on this mess. Getting to another fundamental right that's really been threatened, and again, you see that they're using this emergency as a means to infringe upon it. And as Jake had pointed out, he said that the Sunday rally had actually had excellent coverage from CTV and presented their message fairly well, which is good. And somebody else saying, it's the first time ever they did their jobs last Sunday at 11:30. But I mean, the mainstream media, I think most agree, especially those who are going to tune into this, has gone to crap. I mean, it's fear-mongering garbage. You turn it on. I've never seen a story showing the business owner in tears locking their doors for the last time as they walk away from something they put their whole heart and soul into. I'm not seeing them interviewing the families of some of the people who overdosed because they just sunk into too bad a rut and depression from this mess. We're not seeing them cover that. They're seeing them just every possible stat. I mean, one thing that got me a while back was, of course, Texas is embarrassing the hell out of the lockdown fiends. And because they opened up, everybody predicted doom and gloom. Oh, my God, the Texans are going to be stacked up like cordwood. They're going to be dead all over the place. It's going to be like The Stand. Because Stephen King even jumped in on that and said how irresponsible they are. Nothing happened. Their infections are going down, 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 down. Quit using the vaccination excuse, by the way, people. There were less Texans vaccinated when they opened up than Albertans are vaccinated now. So that wasn't the key factor. But what I saw in that was the media report saying, kind of almost quietly, so infections are down in Texas and all around, but here's a district in Dallas where they're spiking. Like they said, they just refuse to report on something positive, to say it's down all around. They had to pick out and find a little chunk at least. And part of it, I don't know. Part of it, I think, is it bleeds, it leads. But the other part we're got a problem with in Canada is that the government's gotten directly involved in funding media. And now we have a heritage minister, which is just a vile ministry. I mean, it's not the place of the government to protect our heritage. It's us. But telling us that they're going to be trying their very hardest to regulate the internet and media. This is another giant loss. I mean, free press is a huge right around the world that not enough people realize the importance of, and we're letting it go right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine how many of these, so-called journalists are, what they're scared to write because they're going to lose their funding if they go against the grain on some of this stuff, right? So it's good. That's why I'm happy to support the Western Standard. I think you guys have been doing a great job, and we need more of that, right? We need more people just out there telling those real stories, telling because there's places, there's restaurants that are boarded up near my house, and places I used to like going to, gyms, again, a place that's, for a lot of people, that's a big part of their life. And these places are closed down, yoga studios, and yeah, those are all businesses that, it's hard to be successful at, even when times are good. It takes something. And when they're put in these positions, people are, they're losing potentially everything. And it's sad to see. And it's not like it, the other big distinction there, though, is the virus didn't do this. I mean, for all the lockdown fanatics, it's the government that did this. They shut down businesses. People, before lockdowns happened, myself and my wife, we were very conscious of, the potential for this virus to be really dangerous. There's people in our lives that we were worried about, and we hunkered down, laid low, before any of these lockdowns even happened. And people have the right to do that, and they should do that, if they're so inclined. But I think there's too much evidence now on the table for them to continue any of this in good faith, and people have to realize that this is for the most part, these lockdowns have been ineffective. What the governments have done, in my opinion, it seems illegal, and yeah, I don't think the history books are going to be very kind to anybody that's pulling the strings of this stuff.
Yeah, well, if you control the media, you control a lot, and we're not seeing, as you said, that the cost benefit. Your average person staying in their house, going to work, or a lot of people can work from home, or have guaranteed incomes, aren't seeing very directly what's happening to others, and it allows them to kind of dismiss it from their minds. They aren't seeing that ugly truth or the real impacts. I had a panel on last week of 3 individuals, because it was different. It was something you don't see on the news. One was a fellow who had a heart attack recently, and he survived, but he had a lot of therapy he was going to have to go through, and recovery and things to do it. And it's been deferred because of all the lockdowns. He can't get out there. He can't do those things. He can't go walking in cold weather. This is putting him in very serious danger. So that has to be weighed. And it's not saying the virus has no threat. I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying you have to weigh the different dangers. I mean, some people are getting killed by the restrictions as well. So let's look at both. I also spoke to a mother who's been laid off for her 3rd time because she's in the hospitality industry. This is causing incredible tension at home. Tough time with the family, a tough time with the kids, the stress. But nobody, again, the mainstream aren't talking about that. A woman who runs a doggy hotel, again, a small, important, local little business, and they're getting crushed. But the media doesn't touch that, and we need media to dig into that. And I am scared, because right now they're sliding it under the radar. We're coming into an election year, and they're talking very strongly about taking a much tighter control of our media, of our information. And I've used this analogy before just because it was a big impression on my life. I went to the Soviet Union at the end of the 80s. I toured around a bit. I hit a few spots. And the big thing with them when I crossed the border, and I know some of you here have already heard this story, but still it was a big one, was, I traveled a fair amount. I expected them to search for drugs or odd, things. They were searching for books and cassettes. That's what they wanted. That's what they wanted to make sure I was not bringing into Russia. They did not want information getting in that wasn't Pravda. That was their concern. An authoritarian dictatorship wants to control information. And look where Trudeau's Liberals are right now, sliding under the radar, under the guise of fake news and, pandemic or health risks. They are coming after our free information, and we're going to pay a terrible price if they get full control of this.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to believe, actually, that we're going down that road. Sorry, there's the problem is, in a liberal society, we believe in free speech or free expression or freedom of the media, because you understand that people are able to gauge things for themselves, and that the good, real information will rise to the top. Good quality journalism, and it works the same in everything. It works the same in art. It works the same in music or movies. The actual, reliable, good stuff, is where people turn to. So, I don't think that we've elected smart enough people that are, maybe educated in those types of classical liberal values, and they rely on these socialist protectionist type methods. I believe a lot of them, actually believe that they are doing the right thing, fighting some sort of imaginary threat to media. But there's always been bad tabloid journalism. There's always, there was, all the whatever it used to be called, where there was aliens and Bigfoot on the cover all the time, and there's always been that stuff, right?
Weekly World News or whatever,
yeah, exactly, the Weekly World News, and and I like that stuff because I think it's entertaining, but there's the right way to approach these things is to let everybody have their say and have these conversations out in the open, and people are able to dismiss things for themselves. I mean, you don't need this heritage minister like you're talking about. You don't need you don't need government controlling, and the other thing, not only are they they're subsidizing these businesses that are failing. There's no reason why taxpayers should be on the hook for media that people don't want, right? I mean, the CBC is the classic one, but now all of them are getting money, and with that, there's there's strings attached. They need to cover things a certain way, or they're going to lose their funding. That's all there is to it. So, it's terrible. I'm so often at a loss for words that people are able to sit back and watch this happen.
Well, we're at a period where we have more information at our fingertips than any time in human history. Like the access to information, the stuff that's out there that we can find out. I mean, I remember fights over drinking in the early 90s where they'd have to wait for 2 days because one of us would have to go to the library and look it up to settle it. That was reality. Yeah, but it puts the onus on you. But the other thing is we have more access, to bullshit than we ever had in our lives, too. I mean, you go around the internet, there's no shortage of it. But as you said, when you stood in the supermarket, you saw the Weekly World News, too, and you knew that Sasquatch and alien probably were not actually mating in Bill Clinton's backyard, but it was entertaining stuff on the side. The thing is, I think it comes down to is an attitude of personal responsibility, though. You see, what it comes down to us then. You've got to dig through it. You've got to determine for yourself which is the BS, which is the good stuff. And a lot of people are just seem quite happy to say, I'll just let the government take care of it for me. The buzzword of fake news, and they'll tell me what's right and wrong and protect my precious ears from misinformation. But that's wrong. We need more. Just throw it out there, throw it en masse. And as you said, the proper stuff will rise to the top if we can allow it to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I mean, it is a double-edged sword too, like, because there is, anybody has the ability now to start a news outlet, media outlet of any kind. It's easier to get, your journalism out there than ever. It's easier to get your artwork out, your music, anybody, the type of, if you want to make a short film, it's easier to do that, and everybody, has the ability to do that. It's a battle. I think the state will lose because there's no, it's just the technology's way too far ahead for them to shut down all the alternative media, all the alternative news. I know it doesn't look good sometimes because of again, you elect these people to make decisions, and they're making decisions that are in their own interest for the most part, right? They're looking to protect their jobs or their reputation by controlling the media, but I in the long run, I don't think it's a battle they'll be able to win. I mean, in the short term, we're going to lose some money, and mainstream legacy media stuff it's not gonna get any better. In fact, fewer and fewer people are going to turn to it, especially as the more the state gets involved, because the government gets involved in any of that stuff and it just loses quality, right? So in the long run, I'm fairly optimistic that things like the Western Standard will be around for a long time, and yeah, other, and I encourage other people, everybody, to take up that mantle, start a blog, be active with that sort of thing, or even if it's not media, like art, movies, music, all that stuff. It's easier now than ever to get that stuff out there.
Absolutely. I mean, a person can put with their paintings, the songs they've written, their poetry, anything they want. They can share it in ways we didn't have 30 years ago. I mean, what were you going to do? Go and rent a photocopier and then pin it up on street corners. And actually, some people kind of literally did those things back then. We've got some magnificent tools at our fingertips. I'm happy to see some optimism, yes, because I think what they're trying to do is almost like trying to plug a strainer. They can keep plugging those holes, but it's going to keep leaking, and eventually they'll lose. But it's still going to be a battle, and I worry about our lack of will to push back on it, and to speak a bit about it with the Western Standard. I know some people got a little, irksome, upset when we moved on to a paywall model for a lot of the stories and articles. I mean, it'd be great if advertising alone would pay for it. But I mean, the media world has changed, and this isn't even the government. It's just that there is so much competing media out there. And that's part of where the mainstream's running into trouble too. There are not advertising dollars out there like there used to be. It just, there's not enough to sustain things. And we can get those blogs out there. We can get, our own art pieces out and so on. But for an actual news organization to get professionals like Dave Naylor and Alexander Dollywell and Mike Moore, like these are news guys, and they're getting news content out there, principled, good, well-written stuff. But it comes at a cost, and the advertising just won't quite cover it, and then that stuff sort of is our core, but then you can get our editorials outside of it. So I just like to kind of explain to some people, we never thought twice about spending, $15-20 a month for a newspaper subscription in the past, and to get one delivered to your house every day. This is in that price range,
Yep. Well, I mean, and that's part of the problem with the, the government, subsidizing these failing media companies. They're reallocating resources. They're taking money from people and reallocating it to something they don't want, where if people still had that money in their pockets, companies might be able to, they would be advertising with the places they believe in, or people would be buying those subscriptions that they believe in. I mean, these are, it's the typical socialist model. And again, I think that's why it will fail, because they are, they're taking resources from one place, putting it into something that people ultimately don't want, and it's, these things just don't work. I mean, you were in the Soviet Union in the 80s, like you said, and before that, people people were scared that communism was going to take over. The problem is communism doesn't work, so it failed, right? And I think a lot of these programs. I mean, I'm a believer in free markets and capitalism, and that's so I'm confident that ultimately these things will just kill themselves. These government handouts and these subsidies and this corporate welfare, because it doesn't work. I mean, there's, at the end of the day, it's all just going to fall apart, and there will be places like the Western Standard and other people that'll just be there to keep going after everything else is in ashes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it tends to come in cycles. I think we'll do well, and then we'll get complacent, and we'll let it go bad, and eventually it crumbles. But I mean, historically in the world, the end of the cycle is usually actually a violent revolution. I really hope that we don't end up at that point. And again, we are so soft and comfortable. I can't quite see it happening, so I don't know how bad it would have to get. But I just statists, you know, that's a term libertarians like throwing out to make other people chafe, but it's true. People, authoritarians, I think, is another good term for it. Like control, they like power, they like they feel the state really should manage our lives in so many aspects, and that rights are, for the most part, an inconvenience. It gave me chills when Joe Biden started using the language when he was talking about gun control. The Second Amendment, you know, we don't have that, but it's a very precious one, and it's a misunderstood one, I think, but that's a whole separate show. But he started calling firearms deaths a public health emergency. That's no mistake. That is no mistake whatsoever. When you use those loaded words, now you are saying, similar to what we're doing up here, because it's a public health emergency, we're going to suspend those rights. That really is troublesome, and we're going to see that applied to a number of rights as the government wants to move in on it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we probably, you know, there's definitely that potential, right? You know, I like to think that even at the end of these pandemics and lockdowns, there will be enough people that look back and realize, you know, the mistakes that were made, and there is a push back. You know, Alberta, again, I think is you know, Alberta right now is prime for some sort of populist political movement. I mean, you see you know, the NDP underperformed to the extent that you know, people don't want them back. The UCP is, you know, divided on so many fronts, and I think there is an opportunity for something different, you know. And yeah, the statists or the authoritarians, unfortunately, it's inherent in the political system. They you know, we elect them to have that power to work on our behalf, to put our, you know, you vote for the people who you think are going to protect your interests the most, right? And yeah, it's, you know, again, that's why, you know, maybe again, getting back to the charter, I mean, maybe the answer is in, you know, reestablishing something to do around the charter rights, where it's not easy for them to, you know, do these things that they've done. I really don't know. I mean, I'm not, but yeah, you know, other than that, I mean, a massive swing in culture, you know, in the way we view authority, and the way we view responsibility. Those are the types of things that'll make a difference.
Yeah, well, we keep pecking at it. I mean, it's funny. Again, liberty-minded people or libertarians, when it comes to the party end, we tend to kill ourselves. I still can't forget down in the States with that gentleman. I think it was at a convention, showed up on the stage stark naked to give his speech, and you know, it fell into that just because you can doesn't mean you should sort of category of things. I understand the point you're kind of trying to make. I think it's similar to what I'm talking about with the protests too. If you're going to let the fringe dominate the front speaking zones, you're not going to get the broader public on board with you, no matter what you try to do. We get moving into a bit more of a partisan front as we move, you know, towards the end here today. Jason Kenney does have a revolution going on his hands. I mean, things that is there a chance that things could work within the system? We're seeing something. Well, we've seen it, you know, in parties often before. He's got a caucus revolution going on. It started with 15. It ended up with 17 elected members signing a letter in complete, clear, broad defiance of his movement's policies and health orders. Where do you think things are going to go with this?
Where are they going to go? It's hard to say. I mean, you know, it seems to me, and I'm not involved in any of the provincial or federal parties at this point, but it seems to me like it seems to me we're heading to a major split in the UCP, something back towards you know, where the lines were drawn between the PCs and the Wild Rose before. Now I don't really know how that's going to play out in the next election. You know, because I think the NDP is still a, you know, pretty dominant force that could have a big surge in the next election also. But yeah, I mean, it seems to me like under Jason Kenney, I can't see the UCP remaining unfractured, right? So.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of my disappointment. I mean, I was supportive of Kenny. I was supportive of when he ran for the leadership of the PCs. I thought it was time to get things together and get one party, because this was back when the NDP were still in government, and I had really high hopes. I mean, you know, he was a political figure since my younger days as well, when he was at the Taxpayers Federation, and he was a fantastic cabinet minister in a number of roles in government. And of course, he was a pit bull as a Reform opposition member. So, you know, this is the guy who was voted over and over again by the media as the hardest working MP. I mean, this is, you know, he's no fool. He's not lazy, but it seems to me maybe the skill set of leadership is just something that a person really either has or they don't, you know, to be able to hold it together. I mean, Ralph Klein didn't have a big history of partisan involvement and everything, but he just seemed to have whatever that magic combination of traits was to hold it together and really bring things behind him. Whereas Jason Kenney just can't seem to find that within the party or outside of it. I mean, people are not gathering around to follow him. I think maybe it's a whole different animal. You know, running a ministry is a big difference from running a political party or convincing an entire province that what you're doing is correct. I don't think he can recover from this. I don't know though.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he could. I think he could recover. He's smart and savvy, but I don't. As far as recovery, I mean, he could. There's a lot of things he could do, but I don't think it's any secret that he had his eyes on the Prime Minister's office, and his plan was always to go back to Ottawa, and becoming the Premier of Alberta was part of that. Was part of that process while, you know, Trudeau was in that position for a while. And at the time, it did look promising because the economy was on an upswing already, on an upward trajectory when he got elected. And, you know, nobody saw the COVID-19 stuff coming. But yeah, I think those hopes are definitely dashed for him. But he'll still have a long, you know, and successful career in almost anywhere he goes, whatever he chooses to do. But I really think his plan to return to Ottawa and potentially and even his re-election as premier is probably flat.
Yeah, well, that's it. And, you know, it's Danielle Smith in her newsletter. For those who don't get that, you know, you can sign up. I think it's at danielsmith.ca. But she's been very candid in her, what she releases and writes out with that. And it comes out in email. So, you know, that's something else for folks I'd suggest, because she's been somebody who's, I think, found herself. You know, she didn't, as we know, it didn't end very well when she was leading a political party. As I said, it just doesn't seem for everybody who can manage to keep that herd of cats while moving in one direction or not. We talk about the Libertarian Party of Tim Moen. I can't imagine that man's patience. I don't know how he does it. There's nothing worse than a bunch of bloody libertarians to try and keep going. Yeah. But you know, as Danielle pointed out, and it's so refreshing to hear somebody, because she's as aware that she'd made some mistakes as anybody. But talking about the thing that brings these leaders down, it's not when the public gets upset, it's not when the press gets upset, but when your caucus turns on you, you're screwed. They are going to pull you down. I mean, they're worried for their own jobs. They're not worried about what your future is going to be. If you can't get it together, they will yank you out of there. And there's 2 years left, you know, for an ambitious person, I think, to pull the leader and try and get him replaced and make a go of things in the party with 2 years to go isn't beyond believability, I would think.
Oh yeah, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I have a hard, you know, I think the party is split along pretty specific lines. I don't see what we call the UCP replacing Kenney if he doesn't want to go. So, and again, like I say, I don't know how that turns out in an election cycle. You know, if there's another party that forms, or, you know, one of the other smaller parties scoops up some of these, renegade MLAs who are speaking out against Kenny at this point. But who knows? It'll make for good television, that's for sure.
It is that. I mean, it really surprised me when I saw the Speaker Cooper come out, and some people have gotten on him. And to be honest, I like him, Nathan Cooper, a lot, and he's been actually a very good speaker and good at explaining things. I thought he's been quite balanced. But him of all guys should have known, you are the one and only MLA who shouldn't have signed that letter. As a speaker, I mean, you could resign as speaker first and then do it, but you cannot take a distinctive political stance as a speaker. It was a surprising error on the part of Cooper, I think.
It's a political. I mean, yeah, it's a political error, but morally, yeah, he should stand up and say that, right? I mean, if he, and at some of the points in some of these guys' career, I don't know him personally or where he's at with things, but there does come a time when, yeah, you do have to. That's what we need more of, is these people, these legislators standing up and saying, no, we're not going along with this, autocratic rule. I'm letting everybody know what I think of it. There's definitely not enough of that. And same, there's what was it, like the two Barnes and I forget her name, who left they formed the so-called Liberty Caucus.
Yeah, with Angela Pitt and some others, yeah. Randy Hillier in Ontario, and
yeah, exactly. So, and when our Alberta MLAs walked away from that because Randy is an insensitive tweet using Nazi imagery, right? And that is in poor taste, in my opinion. But at the same time, there's what's in worse taste is, these authoritarian edicts. I mean, to walk away from that sort of coalition, to me, again, that I think that's a mistake also, because the right approach to me is to, say, yeah, Randy, that was a tasteless, irresponsible imagery to use, but at the same time, walking away from it from that point detracts from the message, which is that we are, we're looking down the barrel of an authoritarian gun right now, and there are things worse than an inconsiderate tweet, and those things are the policies that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, well, having elected officials speak up on points of principle is so critical. And I mean, as Norman Weed pointed out, he needs to remain neutral between party interests. Yeah, and he shouldn't be barred from representing constituent interests. That gets into a much bigger discussion. He's right. Personally, I don't think the speaker should be one of the MLAs. That's part of the system we've got right now. Maybe have an all-party selection of another individual, but that way you don't take an MLA or a member of parliament and have them stuck in that role of being kind of gagged. And Nathan got to the point. What I was getting at mostly, I guess, was just that they are feeling so frustrated and so upset over this that they did. Somebody like him, who's very usually measured and controlled, stepped out and broke tradition and ranks and a number of things and spoke up. And it's unfortunate with the breakup of the coalition, I guess you could say, with the rest.
Yeah. But even that, as far as neutral, sorry, if he's performing his duties as speaker and remaining neutral between the parties in the legislature, there's nothing in that letter they wrote that is actual. That's actual legislation, right? I mean, they're voicing their concern. I mean, and that we absolutely need more people more elected officials, whether it's the speaker or not. I mean, because his job as speaker shouldn't actually impact his his ability to have opinions on things.
No, it shouldn't. That's a shortcoming of the system there. And I mean, we need to see more of that with MLAs having the ability and the will, and MPs, you know. I mean, the system theoretically should mean that they can speak up and vote differently than the party. But we know in the reality, free votes are a very rare occurrence. I mean, governments promise them all the time, but they rarely happen. At best, they'll say, you know, you can leave the house and not have it on record during this one if you feel, you know, but you can't get up and vote against the government.
Exactly.
But that's a discussion for another time. So I've kept you hanging here for an hour, Darcy. I thank you very much for coming on. It's much appreciated. Always good to talk to you. So where can we see more on what you write about and speak about and go on about?
Well, you can always, I plan on, might be a little while yet, but I'll get back to work doing some columns for the Western Standard after a couple more weeks here. You can follow me on Twitter at Darcy Gerow. Again, not always active, but you know, yeah, the Western Standard is the best place to find anything I've written.
Right on. Well, I'll let you go, and we can look forward to seeing more columns from you. I'm sure we'll have a conversation sometime again. As you said earlier, too, if we could find a patio open somewhere or whatever, we could sit down, have a good beer and a chat some other time. Wow, you can have a beer, and I'll vicariously enjoy it through you.
Let's find some place that's illegally open. I'd prefer that.
I'm all for it. We'll talk a bit later, Darcy.
Okay, thanks.
Well, thanks.
Bye.
Okay, so yeah, you know, as I said, thanks again to Darcy, and some of the commenters have thanked him as well. So we've had a lot of talk about, the challenges to liberties from the pandemic and the lockdowns and the actions of the state in response to it. Something we're not hearing nearly enough about, I think, is the long-term economic consequences. I mean, I'm getting really, really nervous about what we're looking forward to here when we got so many levels of debt, so much expenditure, so much dependence on government for subsidies now, whether it's individuals, whether it's businesses or whatnot. So I've got Fergus Hodgson coming on here. He's from Econ Americas. He likes talking those money issues, precious metals, all that funky trade sort of stuff. But I mean, it's all tied together. The bigger picture, you know, let's look at these macroeconomics. And I just want to find out, get an idea what the heck is happening out there. So
hey, Cory, I cannot hear you, mate. I assume you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, that's great. Let me try different headphones because...
Okay. So Fergus is having some technical issues here. I don't know if he can see it, but I have a private chat area, and I'm going to try and send him some instructions on what he's got to do, because I suspect I know what it is. Oh, okay. I can't, now you're muted.
Okay, Cory. Great. I can hear you, and I hope this mic, is it coming through clear?
You're coming through clearly. Okay.
Great. Cory, it's an honor to be live with the Western Standard. You know, I really enjoy this publication, and it's just so necessary for Western Canada. So I'm glad to be with you, man.
Well, it's much appreciated. It looks like you're somewhere warmer than Calgary right now. Where are you at these days?
I am on a road trip between Houston, and I might even have ketchup on my face, but I'm on a road trip between Houston and Lehigh, Utah, where I'm moving for a new job. And I spent the last day and a half cleaning up my apartment, getting ready for the move. But I was eager to chat with you. And you had mentioned you were interested in talking about inflation today.
Yes.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm somebody who dabbles on the side and talks politics in general and everything. But the main hardcore lessons we've always been taught, typically, say, of the Calgary School of Economists and so on, is that if government is going to continue to keep borrowing and releasing more currency and going on, we can expect hyperinflation to follow shortly afterwards. And we've been kind of waiting for a year. We keep hearing rumblings and warnings of it. I think in some ways perhaps it's thankful, but right now it doesn't seem to be happening. What am I missing here?
Yeah, excellent point. And this is a debate that's raging on, Cory. So it's called the quantity theory of money. The fact that inflation is a monetary phenomenon rests on a formula which is axiomatic, but it depends on four things: output. The basic formula has output prices being equal to the quantity of money and the velocity of money, and so this has been an ongoing dilemma that since the Great Recession or the global financial crisis of 2008, we saw an expansion of the monetary supply, or money supply, but we did not see sticker prices going up in a substantial way. And why did that happen? So the formula would suggest that either there was a huge bounce back in productivity, or there was a slowdown in the velocity of money, or the rate at which monetary money was circulating. And my view is it's both, basically, that people became more conservative during the recession, and that's happened this last year as well. They've engaged in fewer discretionary spending items, or especially tourism, of course, that's off the table. And so and at the same time, our productivity, at least after the Great Recession, continued to rise. So that offsets inflationary pressure. So the real output increased. Now, so why have we not seen it? Those are the reasons, in my view, that people have basically tightened their belts. And there's data backing this, that even though the base money supply has increased, the broader money supply has not increased proportionately, which suggests people are being more conservative. I guess the stereotype would be people putting cash under their mattresses, but in other ways.
Okay, so it's still a little complex, but I mean, at the same time, it just feels. I can see what you're saying. I mean, we're contracting. We're not vacationing. I mean, that could sometimes be 10, 15% of somebody's annual income they might spend on vacations every year, particularly in Canada, where we're going to try and escape somewhere warmer in wintertime if we can. But at the same time, it just feels hard to believe that we're getting much more productive in many ways. I mean, we've seen supply chain interruptions. We've seen larger, production sort of industries being shut down or slowed down dramatically, energy sector, manufacturing. So it still managed to be enough to balance things.
Let me back up a bit. I do not believe we're getting more productive in the last year. So actually, I agree with you on that. The point was about, I mean, you remember, Cory, during the global financial crisis, when there were all these insane bailouts going on, many people, including prominent economists, were projecting inflationary pressure, which just did not arrive. Many people were actually, at that time, because the bailouts seemed so unprecedented in magnitude, I still remember being, in those days, it was one of my first jobs out of college, being an economic researcher in Massachusetts, and many people were even thinking some kind of hyperinflation could come to the United States at that time, because I think the bailout was $600 billion. And everyone just thought, this is insane. What is going on? Of course, everything has been dwarfed by that lately. But no, so I agree with you that of late, the main dampening of inflationary pressure has just been people not engaging in such excess spending. There's been less demand for credit. People have been less inclined to borrow, even with such low interest rates. However, there are also problems with the way we measure inflation. And I wrote an article for the Epoch Times, which you're also writing for, which is great, about maybe 6 months ago, saying that 4 reasons why inflation already has arrived, right? Depending on how you look at it. So, one, already precious metals prices have increased substantially, right? So they got over $2,000 last year. They're around $1,800 now. But basically, precious metals prices increased year over year by something like 40%. And so that is basically saying that the currencies are, that the price, their value is 40% weaker relative to the gold. Now, so also the Federal Reserve at the time admitted that it was going to be softening its own inflation target. So around 2% is what they target. They were going to be moving away from that in terms of the way they said they were going to move to, I think, some kind of moving average, which would allow it to go higher on occasion. Others were that there are now private measures of inflation that do not follow, I guess, the strict consumer basket of goods, and they were finding much higher levels, at least in American cities, and I'm almost certain it'd be the same in Canadian cities. One of the problems is that we often look at the consumer price index, which is just day-to-day household items, and we forget that, the actual price of real estate, for example, has gone up enormously, and at the same time, the stock market has risen during this time of lockdowns. Now, there's another piece of the puzzle which I think many people overlook, and which has been brought to my attention in recent times, the way that if we consider just sticker prices, that's just one side, it's just one dimension of inflation, or of the diminishing value of the dollar, or loonie, or the dollar. One interesting aspect of inflation is that in this low interest world, the productive value, or the returns we get on our savings, is so much lower. So let's say in the past you could buy government bonds and literally get 15% or 10% return almost risk-free. Now you'll be getting 0.5% or 1%. So in some ways, you're being cheated out of the returns on your assets. And I see that as a consequence of inflation, of easy monetary policy. Now, I'm trying to think of a way to bring that back around. So yes, we're not seeing consumer price index increases just yet. The Canadian level of inflation, I think, is still between 1% and 2% reported. However, there are other ways we are seeing inflation arising, or coming to be. And my personal view is that in the coming couple of years, we're going to see much heavier inflation, because I just don't think governments are going to be willing to put interest rates up to stifle demand for credit.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of historical cycles, like in the late 80s, early 90s, when I entered the working world. Inflation was a demon that the state was just obsessed with stomping out. So interest rates back then were horrific. I mean, as you said, I mean, if you got bonds or even savings accounts, you could get 8% on your savings in the bank. But at the same time, if you were a homeowner or trying to get into the housing market, you were out of luck. And at any sign of inflation, the central bank would raise interest rates. We've been riding on these low interest rates, and it's terrifying to think. And that's part of what I fear with inflation, though. The Bank of Canada tends to deal with it. They'll raise the prime rate if they feel inflation's getting a little out of control. And we've got a lot of people who are sitting in a really marginal position right now, and they're taking out the one area of inflation we do have, as you said, is real estate. Houses are going like bananas. But if they suddenly see a 2% rate in the interest hike, there could be a lot of people in a great deal of trouble.
Yeah, so look, there's so much to say about this, and one topic which we should address, I'm not sure how long we have to chat, Cory, but is the fact that philosophically, we're also entering a period, or ideologically, where this modern monetary theory, or MMT, has taken on a new lease of life, or a new level of popularity. But so in terms of interest rates, the fact is that, theoretically speaking, in terms of the basic economic conventions, when there is inflationary pressure, when a central bank sees too much demand for credit, too much optimism, you might say, they're supposed to raise interest rates to stifle that, right? To follow the demand and supply for credit. Now, the problem is that as governments, both federal, provincial, state in the US, municipal, as they become so indebted, they just purely cannot afford higher rates. They cannot pay it. And even Alberta right now, which was once the darling of, I guess, zero debt until the global financial crisis, is facing, I think, maybe, is it 1/6 or 20%? A substantial portion of the budget is now going to debt servicing. So if you were to take, let's say, wholesale rates from 1% to 3%, I mean, that would just take apart the provincial budget. And I just think the political pressure is too great. It will resist higher interest rates. So that's why my assessment is that you will actually see sticker prices going up. And there's the think tanks in Canada have been actually on top of this. I'm really impressed with the work. I've been looking over Macdonald Laurier Institute, the C.D. Howe Institute, and Fraser Institute. They've all been covering this problem of monetary economics in Canada. And they are fearful. These are very careful writers. I mean, I'm much more inclined to just speak forthrightly. They will be much more measured or keep their cards close to their chest. And even these very conservative think tanks are saying that there is a grave risk of basically an unstable monetary regime in Canada's future.
Yeah, well, I do worry about that. As I said, I don't mind being wrong and noticing that it's taken this long seems to catch up with us so far with what's essentially Keynesian economics of pumping money in to try and maintain things when productivity isn't happening. Something a commenter brought up, which is a factor that's brand new to us. I mean, people typically worried about inflation, things like that would hedge towards precious metals and silver, gold, so on. But now we've got cryptocurrencies out there, which has given a new area for some people to, I would ask whether it's a good idea or not to get into that sort of thing. I'm still a little bit confused on the entire concept of how those bloody things work. But how much of a factor in our entire economics are there? Are they just still a novelty on the side, or are they really actually having an impact on things?
I do think they're having an impact, Cory. And not only do I think that, but central bankers think that, right? So the Bank of Canada, maybe 3 years ago now, put out a paper on the prospect of their, a central bank digital currency. The Fed coin is becoming a topic of discussion among central bankers. So first, central banks realize they're under competitive pressure. Always central banks are under competitive pressure anyway from just other central banks, right? So if the Canadian dollar were to go into some kind of very, very severe inflationary process, people would immediately just start using US dollars, right? They'd very quickly do so, right? You could just get yourself an American credit card or whatever and exchange in US dollars. But I assume many Canadian banks will actually allow you to hold US dollars in deposits anyway. So already the loonie is in competition with the US dollar, and that is a check on its, on irresponsibility. And so, in fact, the loonie was stronger than the US dollar for a short period prior to the global financial crisis. And now it's about, I think, 80 cents on the dollar. So that itself is a very clear warning to people that the Bank of Canada is under pressure. It's falling behind the Federal Reserve, and I'm not a fan of the Federal Reserve either. So the question about cryptocurrencies, there is competition. They are bringing it. It's still early days, but I am excited about rising competitive pressure to actually use cryptocurrencies for exchange. Thus far, Bitcoin, it has first mover advantage. That's why it has the best name recognition. It has the most popularity. People know about it. It has baked in problems. It has price instability, and it has slow or costly transactions. So it's not good for small payments. But it also has problems of anonymity. There are new currencies coming in all the time, stable coins, privacy coins that are going to offer better alternatives. So in the long run, 5 to 10 years, I'm excited that yes, cryptocurrencies will be a check on central banks. And I wrote an article about this called Central Bankers Need to Learn to Code, because they realize their own obsolescence. We've all grown up with central bank currencies, and we just assume that's almost like gravity, that's just the way things are. We just have to have government money, but we don't actually. And cryptocurrencies are coming around to show that we can trade in these items outside of banknotes, outside of government tokens, you might say. Now, there's one other element too, which has come to my attention in recent times, that cryptocurrencies offer a certain level of censorship resistance. And I guess every day someone else is getting banned from a social media platform or being debanked. And I see cryptocurrencies as allowing us to build a more resilient economy away from censorship. That's my hope.
That's quite an interesting road to travel down. So, I mean, here's a thought then. If you had a full out currency collapse, like we saw with, say, Venezuela or Zimbabwe or something like that,
Yes.
is there a chance then that a country could actually just kind of shift and embrace a cryptocurrency to fill the void with the complete collapse of their domestic currency?
Well, okay, good question. Already, many countries exist without their own central bank, right? So El Salvador, Panama, Ecuador, these countries all use US dollars. And Panama basically doesn't have a central bank, right? I mean, I think they do have some monetary engagement, but in general, there are countries already that exist without central banks. However, because the most convenient game in town has been the US dollar, they've just gravitated towards that. The question then is, at what point will people, in the absence of a central bank or in the absence of a national currency, gravitate towards a cryptocurrency? How far away is that? And my perspective is it's just a matter of time, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 20, I don't know, but I'm optimistic that it's going to happen faster than most people realize. Much in the same way that social media basically didn't exist 20 years ago, it's now taken over our lives. It's incredible the change that has taken place, and I'm optimistic this will happen. One reason why I'm optimistic is that central bank currencies and the traditional financial sector are basically just inefficient. And what I mean is that it's costly, it's slow. There's obviously you're losing value to inflation. And there's a great joke. I mean, that you see these tropes all the time. But if you were to take the US dollar and put it out there, float it out as a coin offering to compete with other cryptocurrencies, people would laugh at you, right? No one would want to buy it. It's so inferior to the options that are becoming available that it has the advantage because at one time it was pegged to the dollar and it entered into use. So it has the natural monopoly, you might say. But in the long run, it is an inferior product.
Okay, yeah. And I was just kind of wondering, perhaps something that's been holding countries together in a sense. I mean, there is competition among central bank currencies around the world, but at the same time, since pretty much every country on the planet's miring itself into national debt and so on, I mean, there's really not much point in jumping from one to another. The debt to GDP ratio in the States isn't exactly pretty right now. But I mean, so now that you're saying this new option might be quite the game changer down the road here, and perhaps quickly.
No, Cory, I agree with you entirely in that regard. I'm just still processing the way that what you and I probably view as just fiscal insanity has gone on the world over. That no one is immune to this craziness. And there was an article, I think it was the Wall Street Journal, just in the last day or two, saying that the states in the United States that have been under less or fewer lockdowns have obviously recovered quickly economically. Captain Obvious, right? And so I don't know why so few countries have had the courage to really have some fiscal austerity and economic, restraint. But that is the case. So there aren't really any currencies that have been performing well of late. That's why precious metals have done so well over the last couple of years, right? They've just, since this COVID thing, they've gone really well. That's softened in the last few months, but there aren't really better ones to go to. I agree with you. The euro, the US dollar, Canadian dollar, Australian, all these countries are facing, all these regions or cryptocurrency, all these central banks are facing basically monetization of debt. And in Canada, I don't know whether you guys want plenty of numbers or what you want to think about, but in Canada, just at the federal level, not including cities or provinces, about $10,000 per person last year was added to the national debt, right? And so per taxpayer, there'd be about $20,000. So each of us just acquired $20,000 extra debt just in the last year. And in the US, it is a similar problem. There was a great tweet from Thomas Massie, one of the few classical liberals in the US Congress, saying that 25% of the US debt arose just in 2020 alone. And that is unsustainable. And I'm guessing it's even worse in Canada, actually.
Oh, it is. And it's frightening. And we see it on every level, of course, provincial governments borrowing. And then municipally in Alberta, we've got this thing where they say it's illegal for them to borrow. So what they do is they spawn off companies like Epcor in Calgary, I believe it is. Or is it in?
Yes.
They get mixed up. And then they just have that company borrow on their behalf. So it's an indebted entity. And then on top of that, the small businesses in Canada are massively in debt. They most of these aid programs for businesses during this period have actually been loans from the government. I just see, but again, it hasn't happened yet. It seems like we're balancing everything on a pinhead right now, but nothing's collapsing yet.
But what do you mean by collapsing? Do you want to be more precise about that?
Yeah, I guess I would, quite often when we see a true economic catastrophe come, it'll start slowly, but then just suddenly snowball. And I haven't seen that happening, and that's fine. I don't mind not seeing this happen.
Yeah.
But as we say, we're pretty confident that the current course is unsustainable, but nobody's changing course yet. So what have we got to look forward to?
No, Cory, it's an important point you make, because many people seem to think that in these crisis-ridden countries such as Venezuela or Argentina or Zimbabwe, that just hyperinflation arrived very quickly. That's a misunderstanding. All those countries prior to having hyperinflation, well, Argentina did not have hyperinflation, but they've had very high inflation. They had basically double-digit inflation for years prior. So if Canada or the US were to go to serious inflation, let's say more than 100% per year or more than 50% per year, that would be unprecedented, right? Because they've had such stable prices in recent times.
You're muted.
It's starting to rain here. I'm in Texas outside, and it's raining. So
yeah, I see that.
So,
well, I'll let you wrap up soon so you can get somewhere dry.
well, no, but basically the point is that we're getting.
Okay, I got your sound.
I got to run. Well, I will run. It is raining here, but no, Cory. Just making that we can expect a higher inflation, but not some kind of explosive catastrophe. It'll happen more gradually.
All right, thank you, Fergus. You can find more of your stuff on the Epoch Times, and where else was that? Econ Americas?
Econamericas.com. Econamericas.com. I'm sorry about the rain. Cory, I hope I can come back on in future with a clearer connection. Have a great show, buddy.
All right,
Cheers.
Thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. So there's some of the fun of having a live broadcast going on, and the user-friendly nature of our platform. Somebody can log in and come on as a guest from anywhere. And outdoors, I'm sure 9 out of 10 times down there will work perfectly, but the rainstorm decided to interrupt Fergus this time around. But I mean, it was an interesting conversation, and I mean, there's just a lot. It's a complicated field. I don't understand enough about it. So, I mean, it's mysterious, and we worry about where things are going and where they might end up. So far, kind of so good. So, I mean, that much is good, but we still have to be careful. And as I was kind of saying towards the end, we're still moving on that path of just borrowing and spending, and it just seems it has to come to an end at some point. But as Fergus was saying, I mean, this inflation takes a period of time to build up, and we haven't had that double-digit inflation leading up to this. So maybe it's going to pass on. I mean, among this crazy times of us learning all sorts of hard lessons, we're learning that economics in a crisis what we'd accepted as monetary policy wasn't necessarily as accurate as we thought. I still don't feel comfortable having governments borrowing and spending as much as they are to deal with the crisis we're under. It just defies common sense that it can last much longer. But so far, it's held up. So that's enough for today. On Monday, I'm going to be having Spencer Fernando coming on and Clinton DeVoe, and we're going to talk federal issues for the day, party stuff. If you're into partisan sorts of things, that's going to be the day for it, particularly. And yeah, I'm afraid it's going to be rough on O'Toole again, but as for my rant when I opened this show up, he's deserving it right now. It's going to be an interesting weekend. Maybe we'll see some some other politicos and elected people in that party speaking up. As I said, it was quite striking that apparently O'Toole jumped his carbon tax idea into the media, and members of parliament found out about it from CBC rather than actually hearing it from their own party or leadership. This is not bode well, again, especially when we've probably got an election coming very soon. So be sure to come in on Monday. We've also got through the week, Nathan Gita, he's out of Prince George. He's been doing that show on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 10 till noon. We're building this platform. I got to get my tech issues a little better at the sound and try and find a spot with better internet speed. We're getting to it, but I appreciate everybody tuning in. We get some great conversations on here, some great comments from some people. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube, the Facebook. We do specials at times. Things just pop up and we put them out there. And of course, subscribe to the Western Standard Online if you can. It's, keeps us rolling, gives us a steady base of support so that we can keep producing things, getting the word out there, putting the pressure on in the right ways. You got guest ideas, send them on to me. You can find me on Twitter, Cory B. Morgan, Facebook. Lots of people follow me on there. And we'll just keep going on with these shows, discussing these issues, going places that the conventional media is not going to. God knows talk radio is unlistenable these days. So, this is a different area. Plus, you can download this, the audio alone, to listen to at your leisure at another time. So, thanks again. And I thank my guests, and I will rant at you all on Monday.